Welcome to Braindrop by vCom Solutions. Each episode, we talk to IT leaders and experts, explore recent projects, and learn from their triumphs and challenges. We hope today's episode provides you with a unique window into the world of IT, where creativity meets problem solving and technology drives businesses forward. I'm your host, Jethro Castillo. Now let's drop into today's conversation. Today on Braindrop by vCom Solutions, I am joined by Malcolm D'Souza. Malcolm has over 30 years of experience in the IT space across different sectors, including government, financial institutions, and grocery retail. Malcolm, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Just to note that anything that I convey, my points of view, opinions are mine and solely mine, and do not represent those of any other company that I work for, past, present, or in the future.
So obviously we're going to talk about IT, but before I kind of just want to break the ice a little bit, what would you say is kind of a passion or an interest of yours outside of the technology space?
Oh, definitely aviation, without question. As we chatted before the session, I've always had this passion for flying when I was a kid. My mother was in the aviation business, not necessarily flying, but was associated with airlines and airports. So that kind of spurred passion. And that's still very much a passion. Try and find sometimes to actually get up in the air, take some lessons when time permits, but it's fun. It's fun.
So does that mean when you travel, and I don't know if you travel a lot for your job or not, but when you travel, is it kind of just like almost like a kid at Disneyland where it's like the whole experience is something you try to pay attention to as much as possible?
I do, but sometimes, things about aviation that you wish you didn't know because you know so wrong what's really happening.
Yeah, that's right. It's akin to you don't want to know too much about certain fast food industries, or else you'll never eat at that restaurant ever again. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I think that's awesome because we talk about, this podcast talks a lot about tech, but all of us are more than our job, and all of us are more than any one passion or hobby. So it's really cool just to dive into that.
Sure.
But you've been in this industry for a long time.
Yeah.
But I kind of want to get that story. So how did you kind of get started in IT?
So it's kind of interesting, right? So, not to date myself, but, when I was getting ready to get into university a long, long time ago, right? At that time, this would have been, mid to late 80s. Comp-sci was a big thing. That's what people did, right? It was the new industry. It was the cutting edge. It had all the fascination and the glamour, if you will, that went to it. So like everybody else around that time, so like, I'm going to go into comp-sci. Didn't quite work out that way, actually. I quickly realized that hardcore programming was just not my cup of tea, and really wanted to be able to still be involved with computers, but to be able to apply that to, real world problems. How would I apply that to business? So, went to grad school and got my degree in management and information systems, and actually worked for the government in Massachusetts for a while. And started off in the trenches, trying to deploy technology and bring, folks up into, to the current standards in terms of using emails and things like that. And it just kind of progressed from there, right? Did a lot of hands-on work and eventually went into the management ranks and started leading teams, doing a variety of different things in technology. So it's been a good career so far, and I expect it to continue in that fashion as well. So that's how I'm in IT.
And eventually you're going to have an IT position at an aviation company or an organization. And then it's all the best things in one, which is awesome. You realized really quickly that the hardcore programming wasn't for you. And so you still wanted to be in that space though.
Yeah.
Now that you've been in this industry for so long, what keeps you excited about it? What's your favorite part about working in IT?
So what I would say is I think it's the ability to take a challenge, right? So, businesses today, regardless of the sector, are trying to improve themselves, trying to improve the bottom line, right? Trying to become more efficient. So there are a number of different types of business challenges, business problems. It is always interesting to see how we can leverage, technology problems, right? Technology is not always the silver bullet in many cases. So in my experience, especially lately, I would say over the past, 5, 10 years, working to solve those types of business problems, right? I find myself focusing more on, well, the business aspect of it. What are we trying to do? What is the client trying to do? And how else can we achieve and get there? Sometimes it's more around process than technology, and technology is just an enabler, right? With my teams today, who are all technologists, we'll get into these discussions about, we've got this particular need, and I find that many times they'll jump to a solution. It's like, well, what are we trying to solve for us, right? Then let's figure out what the tool is to get us there.
Yeah, I think that is a huge thing in the world of technology, where it's, the next big thing gets released, or the next big, AI right now, generative AI, and it's always about, oh, let's use it as quickly as possible, rather than the other way around, which is, here are our problems. What do we need to solve that problem?
Right.
And can it happen to be the new piece of tech? Is it that tech, or is it not those at all? Rather than going shiny object and then trying to fit problems into that solution,
right.
Finding problems and then finding the right solution is kind of your way of looking at it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I can't take full credit for that. That is, in my career, I've had the good fortune of working for a lot of good mentors and a lot of other, management folks, right? And there was one CIO that had kind of told us, right, we need to stop thinking as technologists and start thinking as business. That's stuff, right? So we are a business before we are a technology company or a technology group.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you learned that from your mentor, one of your mentors, and you mentioned that you kind of have many. I imagine that is one place where you learn about IT. What else do you do to kind of keep up to date with arguably the fastest part, the fastest changing part of any organization?
Right. So, in my position, as a leader and as a manager and managing other technologists and other groups of people, right? It's a combination of things. There's no one thing. Obviously, where possible, I'll participate in, user groups, technology forums, that kind of bring speakers, to the forefront, kind of do that. I leverage a lot of vendors, right? If you're trying to sell me a product, tell me about your product. Tell me what the capabilities, tell me what your roadmap is, so I can get some insight as to where they are going and what they're developing. Kind of gives you a little bit of that glimpse of, okay, this is the next big thing that's coming. And for me, it's a question of, is there a place for it in my organization based on where we are going from a business strategy perspective, or not, right? And then I rely on my team, right? I have a team of experts. They are experts because they know the technology, right? So I learn from them, quite honestly.
No, and I think I always ask this question. I've said this before, and I'm like, oh, please just give me books or podcasts or audiobooks. Please give me those. And I realize every time, every single person goes, well, the most important thing to me are the people around me who know what to look for. And I just have the capability and the ability to ask them and figure out what it is. And I'm doing the same thing right now, right? In this podcast, I'm asking you things,
right,
and you're telling me things that I might not have figured out on my own. And so I think at the end of the day, I think that is the number one way to learn, is to learn from other people who are constantly learning about that thing and moving it forward.
You've seen this on LinkedIn time and time again and in other forums, right? The people are the most important things. If we were the experts, we wouldn't need them, but we're not.
Yeah, exactly. Well, with everything that you're learning, what are you most excited about when it comes to IT and tech moving forward?
It's, I was kind of reflecting on this, ahead of time to say, like, okay, what does really excite me? And, I've come to the realization, it's the evolution and the pace which technology is evolving. I mean, I think back to when I started my career, right? Virtual reality was a concept. Today, it's almost mainstream. We think about, Google Glass and Apple's new, Vision Pro and things like that. It's expected. The young kids expect it. It's become a norm almost, right? I look at my Apple Watch every now and then, and I keep thinking about Dick Tracy comics, where I could talk, where it's become so ingrained in our day-to-day lives, right? Who would have thought that you could have a phone that could do pretty much everything? I mean, we have, companies that I've worked for in the retail space, they run their stores off of a phone, right? And I don't see that changing. I think that's become an expectation right now. So, just watching the evolution of technology over that span of time and what's to come, you mentioned the AI. Oh my God, right? I have no idea what to expect, right? But I suppose, I would say it's, expect the impossible.
You have to, right? I remember I was watching Back to the Future, and obviously anything that talks about the future always tries to predict what it could be in the future. And it was hoverboards, flying cars, and neither of those two are a reality today, even though we're well beyond the year that they moved to.
Right.
And they're still concepts. But I don't think there was any way to predict what the technology is now. And there's no way to predict what it will be in the future. And the thing is that time frame is so much shorter. We can't even predict what's going to happen 6 months from now. Right. That's just how fast tech moves.
I recall the days of, early on in the early internet days. Right? One of my early jobs was to basically had a phone modem that was to dial into CompuServe at the time to download stock quotes that I could then publish. Right? That was the internet. Right? And then all of a sudden, boom, there was one day where suddenly everything became accessible to everybody, and here you go, right? I think AI is going to be something similar in that nature. AI has been around for a while. They just haven't bubbled up to the surface.
Right.
Now, all of a sudden, it's got a focus, and everybody's using it.
Right. Well, evolution is exciting in any capacity, but obviously with change and transformation comes growing pains, right?
Yeah.
With all this excitement, there has to be worry or concern or some sense of unsureness. Is there anything to you there that kind of comes to mind?
So kind of like what keeps me up at night, so to speak, right? So
yeah, I hope you can sleep.
I do. To me, I think data security and integrity is probably the biggest concern right now. We are so heavily dependent on data now, whether it's for analytics, whether it's for, other purposes. How we manage the data, how we secure the data, I think is going to become, if it isn't already, ultra important, right? Data gives us the potential to do so much to better ourselves, as individuals, as companies, really for humanity, if you think about it, right, at the very macro level. But it also has the potential to do a lot of damage and harm if it's not controlled properly and managed properly and gets into the wrong hands, right? So, in everything that we've been doing lately, data has, as it should be, at the forefront when we start considering solutions, to some of the problems that we're trying to solve, right?
Yeah, it does bring up a question for me, though, because security is so important. But how do you ensure that you have the right amount of security to protect data without stifling innovation because everything is locked down? How do you find that balance of and freedom?
That's a great question, right? So I think there is a middle ground, right? I think, besides the regulatory requirements around PII and PHI and HIPAA, those are things you just have to do. So whatever it takes to secure, those classifications of data, that's a given, right? But then the question becomes if you're going to do all of that stuff, how can you still be as nimble enough to implement these solutions and still be competitive in the marketplace, right? I think it all boils down to expectations, right? I think it's early engagement for teams like the information security teams and companies when people are just, in the conceptual phase of trying to figure out what needs to happen. People have ideas, solutions are out there that will do certain things, but asking that question earlier on, and then in some cases, making sure that if we're developing something, that security is ingrained in the development process. I think if you do it that way, we probably have a better chance of making sure we have good, secure solutions rather than putting the brakes on and being more of a hurdle than an enabler.
Yeah, it's always that fine line, and you never want to be the IT team that everyone resents because it's like they're the reason why we can't do anything. But you also don't want to be the IT team that goes do everything and then suddenly the entire company is breached and all data is lost. So
Absolutely.
it's definitely that ground.
I
I imagine. Oh, go
I
ahead.
was going to say, I think raising security awareness, not just within IT, but beyond IT. The company has to be secure, has to be secure aware, right? I mean, if you think about some of the news, in the news lately, things like, ransomware and things like that, it's the innocent doing things unknowingly. But the more we can train them, the more we can make them aware of what the security, risks are today. I think the more people are aware.
And I think you have to communicate it in a way that makes sense to them, right? If you're saying, "Oh, we're just trying to lock this down because we don't want to have any data break," then it sounds almost oppressive or annoying or limiting. But if you almost, and it's all about communication, right? If you're able to buy them and be like, "This is how it could benefit you and benefit us as a whole. It would be best if you did it this way." I think that might
And I think we
make it
talked earlier
easier.
about IT now being viewed more as a business practice more than just a technology enabler, right? Along the same lines, I think trying to explain it to folks by using some real world analogies would be
Yeah.
good, right? It's kind of like, securing your house where, well, if you just put one lock on it and you're in a questionable neighborhood, is that enough, right?
Right. And I think that transitions really well into the next set of questions. We talk about these concepts, but it really is more understood when we talk about actual real life examples and things that are going on. I'm curious, what when you do your job, what does your day-to-day kind of look like? You're not in the weeds doing the programming, you're not in the weeds doing the tech. So what fills your days?
That has been a tough transition, trying to take the technician out of me. It's always been a challenge, right? It's busy. I mean, when we have large projects, for example, there's a lot of attention to detail. I think by nature, I'm a very detailed oriented person. I think most people in technology are very detail oriented to begin with. It's just a mindset. But for me, it's making sure that I'm involved in those areas that I need to be involved, right? And making sure that I'm asking the right questions. So there's a lot of meetings, right? There's a lot of discussions. Sometimes, we'll get into some design sessions depending on what the topic of the day is, right? Not so much firefighting right now, but just making sure that I have a pulse on my team, pulse on the projects, and make sure that they're progressing, looking at it again as a business, right? What's my product? What's my financial position, right? And how are my people doing?
Well, anytime you're not firefighting, that's kind of a good thing, right? You get to finally think ahead rather than just trying to stop what's right in front of you. Speaking of, what is your, thinking of it in terms of a business standpoint, right? Like, what are we trying to accomplish? I'm curious, what is, let's talk about sort of an IT project that you kind of have worked on back in the past. Why'd you take it on? What were the goals for it?
So what I think, probably one of the largest projects and probably the one that I'm probably most proud of is, helping our business to insource, functions that they had outsourced a long time ago, right? This was, when I was working with the supply chain organization of my company, there was a decision to basically, bring a lot of the procurement functions and the warehousing functions, the logistic functions back in-house, right? I can't get into the details of how big it was, but suffice to say, it was big. It was the most important project for that company. So for me, the challenge was to be able to now work with a broad base of business groups, right? Anywhere from procurement to finance to accounting to IT, to the vendor side of the equation, and in dealing with all of those folks and trying to bring all that stuff together in an organized way, and then actually working like the teams kind of follow through with the plan to get that done. So to me, one, it was a challenge, which I always look for. It wasn't really a technology project. It wasn't an IT project for the sake of doing an IT project. It was a business project that IT was at the core of to enable them to get what their business objectives were. So that, for me, that was great. Also had great people working on that project, right? We had a team of about 100 people, just on IT focused on trying to, meet the milestones and kind of do what was needed to get the job done.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. You said it's probably the project you're the most proud of. And I always thought that if I'm proud of something, it meant that it was a challenge. It was hard. It was something I worked really hard, but it was also at the end when it worked, it was very gratifying.
Yeah,
and
it definitely was. I mean, this was a 4-year project, right?
Wow.
Where we had, dedicated resources. That's all they did. That's all I did. I was actually, pulled from another assignment that I had to kind of focus on just this one. Like I said, it was the biggest project in the company. And so it had the focus, it had the support, from the business teams and the executive teams to make sure that it was successful. But it was challenging because of the number of different moving parts that we had to kind of coordinate with, right? We were trying to, I use this analogy at the time, we were trying to change the engines of a 747 while in mid-flight. So operations didn't stop, right? Products still had to go out of the warehouses, right? So trying to effect a change of that magnitude without skipping a beat. Oh, by the way, did I mention COVID jumped right in the middle of all of that?
Oh, that's
so we were doing this all remotely.
Yeah.
Right.
You were making changes to an engine of a plane that was in flight while not being able to communicate the way you were used to communicating.
That's right.
Yeah, it feels.
And the reason why I'm most proud about that, and really I'm proud of the team that I led to do that, we never skipped a beat. We met every milestone, transition facilities, in the timeframes that we said we were going to do that, and stayed within budget.
I was going to ask what went well during this whole thing. I feel like that's awesome. But it makes me wonder, how did you even, when this sort of project came to your lap, how did you then look at it, the scope, and go, all right, this is the plan and this is how we're going to implement it?
Like I said, I had a really good leadership team under me, and, and project teams working for me in that. So we all knew what had to be done. I think what really helped was that, a few of the senior folks that were on the project, like me at the time, had been with the company for a long period. So we had some institutional knowledge that we could bring to the table. We had some business process knowledge that we could bring to the table. So we could ask those right questions and do a better assessment of the impact of some of the decisions that we were making, right? I think that went a long way, right? I think being really clear on here's what we're going to do and here's what we're not going to do, and having that alignment with our business sponsors and our executive sponsors, I think was also key to make sure that we were not trying to boil the ocean, right? We were very methodical in what we were going after, what success looked like, right? And then the support that came after.
Yeah. So what did success look like?
Well, success looked like we were still getting product out the door, right? Like I said, we did not disrupt operations whatsoever, right? So that was job one, right? We needed to make sure that we could affect these technical changes in the background, but we're not impacting the field operations. We were not impacting, the stores that we were supporting. So products still flowed out on time. We had bumps along the way. That's not to say everything went absolutely smoothly, but we had, we had the right procedures and checks and balances in place to make sure that we minimized those, right? And so I think that whole transition of the business process from an outsourced model to an in-source model, the ability to procure, the ability to ship, the ability to manage the financials that went with that, that was success.
Yeah. And just to kind of verify and validate, would you say that at the end of it all, that project achieved the goals and maybe then some that you were hoping
absolutely. Because the business side, we're able to see the benefits of that. We were able to obviously, and I didn't have, all the line of sight into that, but, we were making our numbers.
Obviously, this is, back in 2020, 2021, knowing what you know now, though, in 2024, is there anything that you would have done differently to make any of those hiccups? You would have been, never mind, but to do differently just to make it a more seamless process?
Yeah, I think, and this has got absolutely nothing to do with technology, but part of the objective there is we were taking over a lot of I would say intellectual property, but taking over a lot of assets, right? And I think if from an IT perspective, if we were involved a lot earlier and to work with the folks that were conceptualizing the project, or even, trying to, formulate what it is that they wanted to do, from a contractual perspective, I think there was probably we could have done a better job of assessing the assets and making sure that things like licensing contracts would allow us to transition things over. I spent a lot of time, kind of be a pseudo lawyer there, trying to read through contracts, understand what we could and could not do. And that presented some challenge.
Yeah. I imagine so. This is, I guess, more just, especially because this is a project that was back then. For you personally, what sort of tech, IT goals, projects, ideas are next moving forward?
For me, forward from that, we're doing a lot of transformation, technical transformations right now. So for me right now, it's just making sure that, we are, again, helping the team to define what it is that we're trying to go after, trying to provide them with those guardrails to say, yes, we can, no, we can't, kind of be trying to be the voice of actually being the devil's advocate, right? They have an idea of how they want to do. So my job right now is to try and kind of poke holes in it, to be blunt about it, to say, have we really thought about this, as much as we need to?
Yeah. And from a non sort of specific company perspective, you personally, career wise, 5-10 years down the road, what are your goals? What are your dreams? I never think it's too young or too old to still dream, right? So,
it's obviously, I think, I definitely want to advance in my career beyond where I am right now, more on the management track. I've taken on, in my career so far, I've had the privilege and the opportunity to manage all kinds of teams, all sizes of teams, right? Anywhere from, network and infrastructure technicians to enterprise architecture to service delivery. I kind of done the rounds, right, in my career so far. So it's more about at this stage trying to get to that level within IT where it can be more tied to the business side of it, right, to the executive suite, for example, to understand strategically where do we go and how do we want to go, and become more, and to really have a seat at that table, rather than from an IT perspective. For me, that's my goal, is how do I get IT to the table, right? So we're part of that team making those decisions to move the full business forward.
Right. Would you say that this is a thought process that you've always had, this way of thinking, not just I want to do everything tech, but I want to figure out how tech can be used to solve real business problems?
I would say so. I mean, coming out of, grad school and trying to start my career and where I wanted to go, I knew I liked playing with technology, right? I liked getting my hands dirty, but there came a point in time where continuing to do that would not have given me, I think, the opportunity to progress my career the way I wanted to. I mean, I knew I wanted to get into management. I knew I wanted to go up the ranks. I knew I wanted to lead, a technology department or an IT department at some point in time in my career, right? That's always been the goal.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I have 2 more questions, and these are my favorite questions. Okay. Not to put any pressure on them. The first is, if you could have anything, this is almost like a Christmas wish list. If you could have anything you wanted to help you do your job better, what would it be?
Oh, that is a good one. For me, I think making sure that I've got the right talent, working with me, for me, I think is probably the first thing that I could do, right? I'm fortunate, I have been fortunate, and continue to enjoy that good fortune of having good teams, work with me and for me. And I say that because, it's allowed me to surround myself with people that I trust, and to establish that level of trust and transparency with them. I think if any leader, right, can establish that level of trust, everything else falls into line, right? The ability to get things done, the ability to know that we've got each other's back. I think, so for me, that would be step one. I think, everything else is tangible stuff. Yeah, do I want to have, better facilities? Do I want to have better technology so I can, work from anywhere? Sure. Right. But I think the most important ingredient to that is the people.
Yeah. And I think that's always been the funny, ironic thing to me, having these podcast conversations about IT and tech, is that always the first thing that comes to mind for all of you
Right.
is people first, people first, people first. So if the tech people are saying it's still people first, maybe we should realize, okay, yeah, it's still people first at the end of the day.
I mean, look, all of the toys, all of the tools are all great, right? But if you don't have, the right skill sets to be able to leverage that to get what you want to get from a business outcome perspective, nothing else matters.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. At the end of the day, like you said, the first word, it just becomes a toy.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with toys.
No, there isn't. We all like to play with our toys.
Exactly. When you were growing up, did you get toy planes, and were you a collector of those types of things too?
It's funny. I never really thought about this up until now, right? I didn't play a whole lot with model planes or anything. I was like one of those hot rod, Matchbox cars kind of guy.
Oh, I think you maybe looked at the toy planes and you're like, that's not good enough. I want the real thing.
Yeah.
I played with cars, Hot Wheels a lot growing up too, and Legos. Those are definitely some big things for me. Yeah. But final question to close: what are some of the greatest things you've learned in your career that you kind of like to share or impart with the audience?
So I think we already talked about the people, but let me expand on that a little bit, right?
Yes, please.
So as I've progressed into leadership roles, one thing has become pretty evident to me. And I've learned this the hard way. I've made my mistakes along the way, and I've kind of, learned it from those mistakes. But I think, leaders need to view themselves more as, part of the team, right? We've all heard this mentioned. We're part of the team. It's a big team, right? But I truly believe that you really have to demonstrate that. And I say that demonstration comes by being more of that, by exhibiting more of the servant leadership attributes that we've all heard about, right? I think the ability to establish trust with your team is ultra important if you're going to be successful, right? When I talk about my many mentors, there is one that comes into mind. I won't take him by name, but he taught me a number of things that till today I still employ, and I catch myself like, this is what he would have said. This is what he would have said. This is what it. And it's simple, things, right? There's nothing elaborate. There's nothing, extraordinary, but, showing that you're vulnerable, that you don't know everything, that you need the help, I think is one of those things, right? That's what I would share with, other prospective leaders out there is don't be afraid to say, I don't know, right? Or I need help, right? And leverage your team, to be able to provide you with those things, right? And allow them to say, I don't know, and I need help, right? It goes both ways, right? I think so, to me, that's being part of the team, right? It's one mentality. I help you, you help me, we help somebody else. And that's how the team progresses, right? In the saying that this mentor taught me was like, look, if your team is successful, you will be successful because a rising tide floats all boats.
Right?
And you're just another boat in the lake, right? I think, the other thing is like, as we get so busy with our lives, with the demands from work, with these projects and, all kinds of things that we all leaders, irrespective of IT, every leader does this, is being able to step aside and say like, okay, how do I prioritize? What are my top 3 things for the day? Right. And can I get through those things for the day? Otherwise, it's better to do those few things well than do a lot of things and none of them as well. Right. And I think that helps in our personal lives as well is to be able to set those priorities, focus, and then kind of move on to the next thing that comes in. Right. So, valuing people. I think we've talked a lot about it on this podcast. I think valuing people and showing the empathy and knowing that, and them knowing that you're there for them truly, I think is what I would offer.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Malcolm, thank you so much for your time. This was a lovely conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, of course. Well, I, wish you all the best in your career. I hope you get to fly a plane and maybe do IT on a plane eventually. And I hope that everything that you've learned up to this point only serves you even better in the future.
Thank you.
And I appreciate that while you have mentors, I imagine too that you are a mentor to others. And especially in this podcast, you have taught me things and anyone who listens things as well. So I just want to point that out. That you have learned a lot, but I think you've been able to teach people things too.
And that's my goal. If I can do that, then I'm successful. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time, Malcolm, and take care.
All right. Sounds good. Take care.
vCom Solutions is here to help make your IT projects and day-to-day operations as easy and efficient as possible. If you'd like to see how vCom can help your organization save time and money, request a demo at vcomsolutions.com/demo. Do you work in IT? Be a guest on Braindrop. Go to vcomsolutions.com/Braindrop guest to sign up. Thanks again for dropping in. Don't forget to subscribe, and you can find us on social media at vCom Solutions. Until next time.